What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bill Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bill Bron Bafflestone. So today we're having another episode of my Simple Build series, where I present to you a simple and playable build that lacks the depth of analysis that is the hallmark of my normal build series. Today I'm again going to be showcasing a build that is actually being played by a Patreon supporter and friend of mine, this time Atreides, on another Westmarch server called the New Dawn Coalition, which is pretty new, and I recently joined it and I've been impressed by it. So I did a video about it a couple of weeks ago, and if you're interested in joining us there to play with us, I've put all of the relevant information in the video description below. So this concept is about Frank and Steinbolt, the insane robot. So without further ado, let's jump in and tell you what this character is all about. So here's the role-playing concept. Keeping in mind the context of NDC's backstory involving a worldwide calamity about 70-ish years ago that destroyed a modern, technologically advanced society, very similar to our own, and transformed it with chaos and magic. It's a long story. You can check out the NDC website for more information about all of that. But in any case, Steinbolt, who was a mild-mannered robotic servant, survived this cataclysm, but their creator Francis did not. This drove Steinbolt mad, and in their insane grief, they constructed a flesh golem in the likeness of their creator. So now Steinbolt goes through life presenting Francis as though he is the adventurer, while the autognome is merely his creation and assistant. Now, to facilitate this illusion, Steinbolt uses the telepathic feat, and before he acquired that, the magical tinkering ability that artificers get, to speak as Francis in his old voice as though they are him. So this is some really weird mental thing going on here. And if Francis is ever quote-unquote killed in combat, Steinbolt goes absolutely bonkers until he is revived, at which point they act like nothing happened. So that's the basic concept. As I've already mentioned, the class will be an artificer, specifically a battlesmith, and the race will be autognome. The starting stats will be Strength 8, Dexterity 14, Constitution 16, Intelligence 17, Wisdom 10, and Charisma 8, and the starting skills will be Arcana, Investigation, Perception, and Stealth. For tool proficiencies, we basically have all of them. Herbalism Kit, Thieves' Tools, Cook's Utensils, Smith's Tools, which we'll get at level 3, Tinkerer's Tools, Carpenter's Tools, the Disguise Kit, and the Forgery Kit, and in fact we are going to have expertise in all 8 tools by level 6. Autognomes get a pretty cool package of abilities. They are the only creature in the game that is the construct creature type, and they get a natural armor class. They get built for success, which gives them a bonus to attacks, checks, and saves. They are a healing machine, so you can affect them with healing spells even though they're constructs, and they can actually heal with their hit dice when they use the mending spell. They have a mechanical nature, and they get Sentry's Rest. Now, I've put the ability progression of artificers up on the screen. Keeping in mind they are half-casters, they get an interesting selection of abilities built around their infusions, which are a type of specialized magic items. They also get a couple of pretty cool abilities like Flash of Genius, the spell storing item, and Soul of Artifice, which is a pretty darn good capstone. As a battlesmith, they get a few cool abilities built around the Steel Defender, a pet construct, and Battle Ready, which allows them to use their intelligence modifier with magic weapons. For our feats, we are going to, at 4th level, start with Telepathic to get our intelligence bumped up to 18, and to have that ability to portray our Steel Defender as if they are a real person. Then at 8th level, we get Intelligence +2 to bump up our intelligence to maximum. It's very important to get to maximum intelligence very quickly on this character since it affects so many things, including the Steel Defender's attack bonuses. Then at 12th level, we are going to add Metamagic Adept for Extend, and then something that doesn't really matter, because all we really want is Extend. We can get Subtle so that we can't be counterspelled. We can get Distant so that we can use Cure Wounds and Revivify at 30-foot range. Or you can get any other one, because it really doesn't matter. We're going to be using both sorcery points for Extend. Then at 16th level, we're getting Lucky, and at 19th level, we are getting Alert. And do keep in mind that if you are going to be able to retrain your feats, which is a pretty common thing in West Marches and is something that exists at New Dawn Coalition, Then at 12, you could consider swapping your intelligence +2 to a half feat, and then adding another half feat at 12. For example, Fey Touch plus Skill Expert Perception or some such. That said, I'm pretty happy with Int +2 and Metamagic Adept because Extend spell is going to be doing a lot of work for us. Now, as mentioned, the Artificer class is largely built around their infusions, and because this is a simple build, I don't want to go into too much detail about those. However, I did do an Artificer series of 6 previous builds, which you can access for more detailed discussion. I will link both the Battlesmith and all of the other builds in the video description below. But the main thing with Infusions is to talk to your team and spread them out to fill holes. Keep in mind that you can buff your Steel Defender as well as your allies, but there are a lot of Infusions that can really help out your party. For example, if you give Repeating Shot on a hand crossbow to an ally who has Crossbow Expert, all of a sudden they don't need both hands to use that crossbow, and now they can use a shield. So not only is that like a magic weapon, but it's also like a +2 bump to armor class, which is fantastic. Or a Mind Sharpener often makes sense if you have a wizard or a druid or whatever that has strong or dangerous concentration options, like for example Conjure Elemental, which if you lose your concentration on it, the elemental becomes hostile, so you definitely don't want that. Now keep in mind you can't use the Homunculus Infusion because the Steel Defender already uses the bonus action, which the Homunculus also uses. And Returning Weapon for a Javelin makes the most sense as a personal weapon. That gets you decent range, 30-120, which is better than nothing. And it's basically the same as Enhanced Weapon, except it also means that the Javelin can come back, allowing you to use a ranged weapon. Now, Enhanced Weapon does become superior at level 10 when it bumps to +2, but you can give that one to an ally and just keep using Returning Weapon for yourself. When it comes to spells, I again don't want to go into too much detail. Again, you can refer to the video description below to see my previous series of 6 Artificer builds for more in-depth discussion. But of course we are going to start with the standard caster defensive package of Shield, Absorb Elements, Featherfall, and Expeditious Retreat. Although keep in mind that level 1 slots are also used to revive our Steel Defender, so they're pretty tight. We're pretty much going to be using them on the Steel Defender and the occasional Shield and Absorb Elements. And we're going to add other basics like Cure Wounds, and Aid, and Continual Flame, and Rope Trick, and Dispel Magic, and Aura of Vitality, and Revivify. These are all no-brainers in my opinion. And my suggested concentration progression, noting that the lower level options are still strong options in later tiers, especially Web, since that is a super strong spell, and the ones that we add later aren't super impressive, plus you don't have too many high level slots, and we'll be using second level slots a lot, in which case Web is a fantastic option. But I recommend at first level using your concentration on Fairy Fire, or in certain scenarios Expeditious Retreat. At 5th level I recommend Web or Levitate, usually Web. At 9th level, I recommend Haste if you have a rogue or some other ally that can use it to good advantage, or Intellect Fortress in certain scenarios, or Web, which is still really good at 9th level. At 13th level, I recommend Summon Construct, since I'm a huge fan of summons, maybe Resilient Sphere in certain situations. And at 17th level, you can add Bigby's Hand, Wall of Stone, or Animate Objects. I like Bigby's and Wall of Stone a little bit more than Animate Objects, but there's going to be a lot of subjective preferences involved here. Strong non-concentration options to consider will be Vortex Warp, Pyrotechnics, Tiny Servant, and Transmute Rock. I plan on leaning on those pretty heavily, even though we have to keep in mind that the Tiny Servant plus Magic Stone combo is diminished by using our bonus action for the Steel Defender. I do like Tiny Servant and Magic Stone for a bonus action in most cases, but Battlesmith gets the Steel Defender. However, the Tiny Servant plus Spell Storing Item combo is still pretty solid because you can issue general orders in regards to the Tiny Servants. It's just that Magic Stone uses your bonus action, so as long as you're not using that, it should be fine. So what kind of playable synergies can we enjoy with this build? Well, first of all, the Auto Gnome gives us 2 extra tool proficiencies, which become expertises at level 6. So that's how we basically have expertise in all of those tools. Then keep in mind that because the Auto Gnome is a construct, the Steel Defender can use its Repair ability on it to get 2d8 plus proficiency bonus free healing 3 times a day. That's fantastic. The Auto Gnome is the only playable construct, so is the only race that can use this combo, and it is huge in Tier 1 and 2. That's a lot of healing for Tier 1 and 2. We also have Built for Success plus Flash of Genius for a really good saves bump. I mean, Built for Success also works with guidance and expertises for skill and tool checks, but getting that great saves bump with Flash of Genius is fantastic. It's really nice to have a saves bump in 5th edition. It's really rare to get as good a saves bump as you can get with Built for Success and Flash of Genius, so I'm really happy with that combo. Then we can use the Mending Cantrip plus Healing Machine plus the Steel Defender for crazy strong off-combat healing. Remember that we can use the Mending Cantrip to use a hit dice to heal, even when we're not taking a rest. Plus the Steel Defender can use its repair ability on us, and we can use our Mending spell on it unlimited times, so it doesn't take much downtime for us to heal up, and we can just keep going even if short rests are unavailable. Now note that if you're using the flanking optional rule, then having 2 bodies available is hugely advantageous in setting it up. And interestingly, note that Force-Powered Rend is an intelligence-based attack. So that means we can combo it with non-proficient armor penalties, which I've put up on the screen, and we can see that because of the int-based attack, we don't face too many issues. So we can actually use plate armor or plate barding plus a shield, even though we're not proficient with them, and we really only get a -10 move reduction, which lowers the Steel Defender from 40 to 30, which is not too bad, and then bad strength and dex saves, which is also not too bad. We're not really affected by having bad strength or dex checks. We don't use strength or dex on our attack, so those are unaffected. And the Steel Defender doesn't cast spells, so that's unaffected. Even if you give it the spell storing item, that is not the cast spell action, that is the activate an item action. So you can actually use armor on this character, even though you're not proficient, to get a really high armor class. Now keep in mind that because the Steel Defender is of humanoid form in this case, then we can use regular armor. If it's not a humanoid form, you would have to use barding. But we can then buff the AC further with magical armor, which we can make with our infusions. So with a magical shield and magical armor, and starting with plate, we're talking an armor class of 24, 25. And then when Improved Defender comes online, now we're talking 26, 27. That is pretty impressive. Also, because we took Metamagic Adept Extend spell, we are going to be able to extend Aura of Vitality. That's going to give us about 140 hit points worth of off-combat heals. That's amazing, especially in a West March format. And we will be using Extend Spell plus Tiny Servants, or Aid, plus Sentry's Rest for 10-hour duration when rest casting. Alright, so a few observations about this build. The Steel Defender is super strong in levels 3 and 4. It's basically like an early extra attack that also tanks. So most battles are tuned for characters that don't have extra attack at levels 3 and 4, so to get it is really amazing. And the fact that it's also healing the PC at those levels is just fantastic. Both of those things combined make this a really, really powerful character at levels 3 and 4. Then at level 5, the other classes catch up a little bit, but it still holds up really well. Now our first feat was Telepathic, which was a role-playing choice. There are lots of different intelligence half feats available, and maybe some would suit your character better, but for this character concept, it was a great choice, and it's been very useful in a lot of situations, according to Atreides. I mean, silent comms are always great for covert discussions. Having a subtle detect thoughts available is a win button for interrogations and some interactions. And apparently it's nice to be able to distract enemies with voices in their heads that have no obvious source. So Telepathic is doing a lot of work for this character. Also, the unusual tactic of presenting the Steel Defender as a humanoid can cause enemies to waste actions against it with bad choices. For example, they might try to poison it or charm it, and it is immune to both of those things, so that can work out for you. And one thing that Atreides has reported is that using the Steel Defender as a mount is suboptimal, and it's much more useful as its own entity. And I have to concur. I actually, on another character, use the Staff of the Python quite frequently, and I sometimes think about mounting it, but whenever I do, it always seems to be kind of a hassle. I want it to attack and tank, and so I usually just don't bother to mount it. So I can see that argument holding up with the Steel Defender. Now also note that the Steel Defender is immune to exhaustion, and the Auto-Gnome gets mechanical nature, so the two as a pair have the ability to travel without breaks indefinitely. So pretty niche use, but it might come up. Apparently expertise in all 8 tools has been much more useful than expected, And having a cheat sheet readily available for all of the Xanathar's Guide to Everything uses of the tools is recommended. If you're not aware, these tools all got little bumps in Xanathar's, and while I'm not super impressed with them, sometimes they can be good, right? The cook's utensils for an extra hit point per hit dice spent during a rest is good. Getting advantage on noticing traps and stuff can be good, so having those tool abilities can be good. And this is a solid generalist build that fits into almost any party. That's fantastic in a West March when you're not always playing with the same people. And so this build can fill the melee role, the ranged role, the tank role, a support and off-healing role. It has very good skills and does solid damage. Finally, we went with straight build. I have to say that multi-classing is usually just not worth it, and that straight builds are generally my preference these days. But if you want a multi-class, you could consider it. To me and my team, the only multi-class options that really made sense were War Wizard 2 or Fighter 2 to get Arcane Deflection or Action Surge, but they don't add all that much, and they sacrifice that amazing Artificer capstone, so we all thought that being a straight build made more sense. So that's it. That's Frank and Steinbolt, the Artificer Battlesmith Auto-Gnome that my friend Atreides is playing at New Dawn Coalition. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Build Bronze and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbrand Bafflestone. See you next time.